And we are live.
That
Although
was a tough one.
if you're listening to the podcast, we're not live. That's not how podcasts work. But we are now live on YouTube as we're recording this. Welcome to the Business Not As Usual podcast with your hosts, Vincent and Michael.
What is going on today, Vince?
Mike, I'm having a great day. It's
Amazing.
it's not often that I get to say that. And it's good because yesterday was a terrible day.
Oh,
And it just, I fortunately warned my team, hey, I'm not in a great mood today. So if we have meetings, the secret word is lemon tree because I'm gonna go nuts. But today I'm feeling great. How about yourself?
I'm feeling really good.
Yeah.
It's it was a busy day, but busy days are always the best days. It looks like you feel like you've accomplished something.
Yeah. Well, and you are we have both been extremely busy in the last few months. And we're going to use this podcast over the next 4 episodes to talk about something that we have been working on for a while. So for those that maybe have listened to a previous podcast or like a previous version of this podcast, there is a massive conference every year held by a couple of different groups, but one of them is the International Institute of Business Analysis, the IIBA. The conference is called the BBC Conference, Building Business Capability. And you and I will be co-presenting in a highlighted session, in a highlighted time slot, which is a lot of pressure.
Oof. Now I tried to ignore those things. So I'm like, this is when we're going. Now you're telling me about highlighted. I ignore that stuff.
Yeah, no. So we are in the prime. Like people fight for the time slot that we got. We are after the opening keynote on Wednesday, October the 21st, I believe it is. And so, Wednesday, October the 21st. And so what we're going to be talking about at that conference, or the topic of our session, is the missing pieces of the digital transformation puzzle. And so we've identified the 4 missing pieces, which are, Mike?
The first one's decision-making, Vince.
Yeah. And then?
The next one is culture.
And then
we've got process.
And then we've got people. Yes, we do. And so over the and sort of wrapped in the idea of customer focus, customer centricity. So sort of, the stuff that we've talked about, if you've listened to this show before, nothing is going to be foreign, but we thought that we would go into a little bit more depth in each of those categories to get a little bit more tactical and, selfishly, to sort of practice some of the stuff that we're going to want to say at the event. So we're hoping to get this entire series recorded in time for October 21st. But so today we thought we would start out with something near and dear to you as one of the leaders in the digital and in the business transformation space, decision making. So what does decision making mean? Just to sort of frame the conversation, Mike.
So first, I want to say you're right, Vince. Customer centricity is like table stakes. So we're going to touch on it in every one of the 4 buckets, but I don't want anybody to think that being customer centric is not one of the pillars. It definitely is, but it crosses so many different of the pillars that we're going to talk about that we feel these other 4 are worth highlighting with the backdrop of being customer centric.
For sure.
And so in terms of decision making, you've heard me say this before. You need to put the decision making, you need to push it deep into the organization if you want to have any chance at velocity when you're transforming your business. And when we're talking about a traditional company or a traditional way of delivering products, services, many of the a lot of that decision making goes up the ladder. So a whole bunch of work is done by people that are close to the customer or close to the process or close to the people. They're in workshops. They've had these long conversations, and then all that wealth of information somehow needs to be distilled into PowerPoint. That deck then, right, has to be a deck.
Stupid PowerPoint.
And then so you try and distill hundreds of hours of customer research and interviews with CSAT, process issues that have been brought to the table, maps, great discussion at workshops. You try to distill that as you go up the proverbial ladder, and you only have an hour, and of that hour you have half hour. So you try and throw all this information at people that are not in those meetings, and then say, so what should we do?
Right.
And things get lost in translation, right? Things get missed because you have to cut the time, and then these governing tables get busy. They run over time with certain things. And so for me, the expectation is, as you go higher in the organization, these leaders can't be expected to make these detailed decisions because they haven't had the benefit of all the work that's gone on.
Right.
And so something going up as a recommendation that we can either go one way or the other, I think that is how transformations start to, A, they take way too long. And then B, you don't get the results that you're looking for because those rich conversations get lost. And so to me, decision-making within a framework really needs to be at lower and deeper into the organization.
Right.
If you want any type of velocity and rapid iteration.
See, and as you were saying that, I'm sort of reminded of the great immortal words of George Costanza. As he he gets insulted at work, and he comes up with this comeback about the jerk store. Like, well, the jerk store called and they're running out of, like, hey, George, you're running out of shrimp, because he's eating all the shrimp in a meeting, which, okay, George, maybe a yellow card. Well, the jerk store called and they're running out of you. And so he takes it to the group and they're like, that's terrible. And it starts, they all have their opinions, and they weren't there. They weren't in the meeting. They are just sort of, outside there. They are the upper level governance that's there to provide an opinion. And then he's like, this is why I don't work with a crowd. This is why, because I can't explain to you all of the context, and you're just, this, everything gets homogenized and it loses the edge. The joke is jerk store. Jerk store is it. And so, it's sort of that same idea, right? Like, you have people that aren't engaged at that ground level discussion, at that research, in those insights, providing direction to the people that are. And that, to me, is ridiculous. It's also incredibly difficult, and you said this, I just want to sort of echo it, to be able to take all of that research and distill it down into a 10-minute presentation, because you're not going to have the same, you are challenged to make people feel the same way about something that you do, but they're not as invested as you are. Right. And so by driving that decision-making ability down, and certainly having parameters within which you can make decisions, but driving that downward into the organization lets you, as you've already alluded to, take action. And that's the important thing.
Correct. And so it allows you to take action quicker, and allows you to course correct quicker. And so if your teams are accountable for the decisions they make, and you come out with an iteration, which we've talked about, Big Bang is not the way to go. They come up with solving a customer problem, and it doesn't hit exactly the mark that they thought. Well, now they have all the information to course correct And I don't
Right.
want to say fail and fail fast because everyone says that.
Yeah.
But to me, it's if this wealth of work has been done, your customers' lives are messy, and you're not going to figure out every little thing. Doesn't matter how much testing you do. And that's where you have to think, we've got an iteration out. Things need to be tweaked, and we can tweak that, and it can be done quickly because a team can take ownership of those decisions instead of having to justify going up a governance ladder about why it didn't work, and then what are the things you're going to do to make it better, and then being somewhat under the gun to say, well, you came up with this, it didn't work. What makes you think this is going to work? That is not a way to move to a new world, because it's going to be messy, and the trust as we talked about, you're putting your best people on these projects, on the larger transformation. So you got to give them the freedom to work through these things.
Right. And I think that's the important thing, right? When we talk about decision making, it's not about necessarily the formal, like, yes, you can do this, or no, you can't do that. It's about deciding on, what features in the backlog to prioritize, what processes to improve that are going to benefit the organization, going to benefit your customers. What how to you could even go to the level of how to structure, the flow of work. So how to have work flow through to provide the best experience. And so, you cannot rely on, your leadership, your executives, your capo di tutti capi, doing that, because they have other stuff to worry about. They have other strategic directional things. And when they get bogged down in the minutia of the operational, sometimes leaders will excel in that because that's where they came from and they like it. But other times they just want to get you out of their way, and so they will tell you to do the thing that gets you away from them the fastest, which can sometimes mean you get your way, but it could also mean, no, you can't do that, go away. And so, it's not to say that they aren't taking the care, it's that they have other things to worry about. But you've got to be able to have that, to be empowered to make those decisions happen, so that you can, as you've alluded, have the velocity through which you can get things done.
And it's also giving that decision-making power, right? As we've said, you're putting the best people on these projects. You're putting the best people to transform your business. And when you're innovating, let's say, a customer journey, those are the things that are going to be tough, because you're moving away from what as a company is working, or might not be working, just needs a tweak. But if you're going to truly transform, you're going to do things in a brand new way. And that is what would be proposed. This is how we're going to do it. And when you have these people that are doing that, remember, they're going to be the future leaders. They are the ones that are eventually going to own these great ideas, or they're going to own the new business. And so so you're also giving them the experience about how to make these decisions, what happens when these decisions don't go exactly the way they thought, how to course correct. And also, they're going to be the business owners of these new things. And so if they're not given the chance to make the decisions and own those decisions, what comes out on the other, good or bad, what comes out on the other side is, if they don't feel ownership to the new world, they can't take ownership of it. So remember, you're also grooming the people to be the new leaders in the business, or new lines of business. So that's also very important. Not about just for today decision making. It's Are you giving the people the tools to be able to make decisions going forward?
And that you, as you said it, and you've already said it, but I immediately thought of succession planning and how this becomes almost a proving ground. It allows you to, in a somewhat safe environment, make decisions and see how they work. Is this then how we end up with so many managers and so few leaders? Because the lower level leadership, the manager or the whoever, isn't making decisions, and as a result is not going to learn that lesson. Because it's one thing for your boss to tell you, do this, and you do it and you see that it works. It's another thing for you to make the decision. So, and I think, we get into that distinction between managers and leaders. Is this why we have so many why we are over? I think we may have just unlocked something here, Mike, because that might be why we have so many managers and so few leaders in the proper sense.
Right. I mean, it's possible. Not sure. Might probably need more research on that and more brain power than the two of us. But I think
I think we're fine. I mean, we've
I think that
we're smart.
I mean, so to kind of bring it back. I'm not saying that people make decisions in isolation and then things get and then things just get launched. I don't want people to think that's what we've talked about for the last 15 minutes. What I'm saying is the decision is made and owned, and it's presented to up the governance chain, right?
Sure.
But it's presented in, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to move the business forward.
Right.
And what comes with that is, it's not like going over the nitty gritty. It's going to senior leaders with the context. It's going with what you're going to solve, how you're going to solve it, how this thing solved it. And then, but more, I don't want to say FYI, but more of, this is what we're going to do. This is how we came here, telling that story, and then allowing them to own that. So when you say, is there so many managers, not enough leaders? Like, that is a skill in of itself. Being able to tell the story about, here's what we see, here's what we're getting from our observations about the customers, here's our insights on what their problems are, here's how we're going to solve it in a new, innovative way, and here's what we're going to launch. Being able to tell that story, if you can't tell that story, or if it's just, here's a bunch of information that's going to go to someone else to make that decision, that you're not telling that story, and you're not building the next set of leaders, because they're not working on that skill. They're all, you've made them researchers, and then we're going to give it to they're going to give it to like the important people to decide, and that's not
right.
And as we talked about last time,
important people,
right? And then we talked about the role of the sponsor. I think that's it can't always be up to the sponsor to sell these ideas. The sponsor is looking for the team to create the product with all the decisions, and then tell the story about the product. But that's what gets delivered, as opposed to doing a bunch of research and then at every gate it gets talked about over and over again until some version of that product gets launched. That's what I'm talking about, as opposed to you have people running around and then throwing out products left and right. That's not what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. I like that one a lot better. It's more fun.
That one?
Yeah.
Well, you're not you're not building leaders that could tell a story, because
that's and you're right. You're right.
Part of the work.
That's fair. Maybe I just took it to a much different place.
You went way too extreme.
I got really excited. So let me play a little bit of devil's advocate, because, and I'm going to bring this up, and I know this is something that you practice and believe in. So, I don't think I'm speaking crazy to you, but what about the value of governance in preparing leadership for change? So you're still going to them with, here's the problem here with the story, right? Here's the problem. Here's what we are hearing. Here's what we're going to do about it. And here's what we're going to get for that.
Yeah.
But taking it as an FYI, but more than that, taking it as a, are you cool with this? Are you good with this? And can you support this decision and this direction? Because you are a key stakeholder and we don't want you to be caught, blind on this.
Well, and so that's why I needed to bring back the conversation of everybody just running off and doing whatever they wanted.
Wild West, baby.
Like Wild West. And then senior leaders are like, when did that product come from?
Yeah.
Oh, we just launched
when did we stop selling shoes and we started making yogurt? When did that happen?
So the governance tables are there's certain decisions that need to be made at certain gates in the organization.
Sure.
Right. If you're at a bank and a direction has come to that goes against regulation, that your senior leaders have to be able to support that, because they're going to have to, it's more than just launching the product. They're going to have to go talk to the other agencies, the government, to talk about this is what they want to do.
Right.
So there's different gates. I'm saying within the gate that you've established, the going to a governance table is as much telling the story to let them know where you're going, but it's not a way to stop that within the authority level, to stop what the decision has been made or override the decision. Right. That's not what my point is. So the governance table at that point is a way to bring them along in the change, but it's not for them to overrule, where in most cases it's a lot of research, and then you leave it to them to make the decisions. That's not. So that is where we're drawing the line.
Yeah. So it's going and saying, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Versus what should we do next?
Correct.
Okay.
We've done a whole bunch of research.
Yeah.
That we've had to distill into 15 minutes and 10 pages of a deck. What do you think? Mm-hmm. That is not where you get the velocity. That's not where you get the richness of a decision.
No.
Which should be closer to the customer and to the process.
Right. And I think being able to say, we've done these hours of research, we've done, we've had 80 interviews, whatever.
Right.
Here's what we're hearing. Here's what we want to do about it. Yeah. This is what we're going to do. And it's almost like we're going to do it unless you see a reason to stop us. We're going to do it without saying it that way.
And so it would have to be a major issue of why you're not, I don't think we should go in that direction just because it'd have to be a major miss, which becomes a team problem. If you miss something so major that a senior leader had to point it out, somewhere along the way, you didn't do your job.
Right.
But within that framework of what you can decide on, you're deciding on it. And everything is an FYI and a storytell of here's where how the program is continuing for the new world that's coming, because senior leaders need to know that.
What if, and I'm asking, hypothetically, what if that story, because, and we've talked about offline and on this podcast about how we view story. What if that story doesn't paint the rosiest picture? How would you then suggest that someone goes to senior leaders and says, here's a problem. This is what we're hearing. Here's a problem. It doesn't make us look good. What should we do? Or not what should we do? This is what we should do.
Mm-hmm.
And it may cause them to be, defensive. How can you overcome that defensiveness? And maybe we're getting a little bit too deep here.
I think you overcome that by presenting objectively the data. right? So if you come with the research of a customer is the research of a customer.
Yes.
If you put no lens, like your job is not to put a lens on that to make it better or worse. And if you really want to do, and what I mean by that is sometimes you really want to do something, so you paint it based on what the customer is saying,
bias. Yeah.
Right? You introduce bias.
Yeah.
But what I found is the teams that are looking, they're looking to do the right thing. And if it's the data is not showing them where they think they want it to go,
Mm-hmm.
and they let the data bring them to where they need to go, you're going to get senior leaders that trust you because they know that you're presenting as objective as you can a picture of the customer. Remember, when we started this podcast, we're not using customer centric as a pillar because customer centricity runs all of it. And this is a perfect example. If the customer is saying this and you put no lens on it, I'm not sure what the argument is. That is what the customer is saying. This is what their customer need is. This is the customer problem. You now need to solve that customer problem. That's the decision you have to make. How you solve it is for your team.
Right. You
go solve it. You paint the picture of why you're solving it, and then it gets solved. That's where the velocity comes from, and you're presenting that not as a decision point, but of this is what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. And so that is what when we're talking about decision making, and not every little process needs to go as a research paper up the governance chain. That is where you're going to be part of the number that we always talk about of failure.
Right. Yeah. And obviously, I mean, you probably saw that I was grinning a little bit there because everything you said, like it sounds like I would say it, right? Let the data guide.
I'm learning.
Hey, I think, we've learned a lot from each other. And this is the value in coming at the same problem from multiple perspectives, right? Like you come from that customer-centric, customer-focused view. I come from that process, internal view. And I think when you put those two together, you can do some really, really cool things. But yeah, I mean, like, let the data doesn't lie. The problem is the data can be skewed to tell your story or the story that you want. And that's where honestly, people can get into a lot of trouble, particularly when they get discovered, because eventually the data shakes out and, there we go. So awesome. I mean, I have nothing else to add to the idea of decision making, and really this is your wheelhouse. So is there anything else that people need to know about getting this approach to decision making and driving it down deep into the organization?
So we talked about it from very non-structural, like we just talked about guiding principles. So I would say if you're going to the guiding principle of driving the decisions as far down into the organization as possible is a guiding principle. When you build your framework, your governance framework, and please don't make it a lot of levels.
No.
That is where you put like these benchmarks, like from everything here, we're not going to weigh in on. What we're going to do is just be told about it so we understand what's going on. Here's where this set of leaders are going to make decisions. This is where this set of leaders are going to make decisions. And they can't overlap. They have to be completely different. Right. These need to be super tactical. These need to be at the strategic. These need to be at the enterprise. So when you're building your framework, make sure you're very specific about that, because what you don't want is overlap. Because when you get overlap, that's when every decision starts to go to every table.
And I think if you want to get a little bit more detail on what Mike just said, I think it's episode 7 where we talked about governance. Yeah. And that is like, go there. Go listen to that episode, because we go into way more detail. But you're right. You've got to have that sort of distinct because it's a way of having people be accountable, right? And that's, if there's one thing people are really good at, it's shaking accountability. And so I think that's to me, that is a great place for us to end. But yeah, if you want to go back and listen to episode 12, the most fire episode on governance you'll ever hear. I went through a period where I was giving, like episode 11 was quick, transform, go. Where we talked about like rushing your work, but this one was called the most fire episode on governance and business transformation you'll ever hear.
That one I got a lot of listens on, so it must be the title. I did. I'm like, well, that many people cared about governance.
So maybe we should name them all.
We should name them the most fire ever.
This is what happens when you let me name the episodes, because like I wrote down the title for this one. Part 1, decision making. It's gonna have to be better than that, because
I think it's gonna be the most fire part 1 of decision making ever.
No, it'll have to be something else, but like decision making, like that sounds like it's straight out of Gartner or McKinsey or something. And like that's not us.
Hey, don't throw shade, bro.
I'm not throwing shade, bro. No. I'm not. Hey, listen, I'm not throwing shade. Hey-o. I'm just saying they are good. Yeah. And so as a result, they have an image that they need to portray, and we don't are not image. We are not we're not we don't have an image
to portray. That's right.
No, we have an image. Our image is that of less constraint, and so we can be a little bit freer in a lot of the things that we talk about, and by naming our episodes with ridiculous names like the most fire episode on governance ever. So so that was good, and that is that is part 1. In the next several episodes, we're going to go through the remainder, the culture. We may do one on customer centricity, because I think there may be some value in doing that, and then we'll talk about people and we'll talk about process. But I'm interested to know, after you've listened to this episode and maybe gone back and listened to that episode 12, how have you been able to change the approach to decision making in your organization, or are you already doing this and we're just preaching to the choir? Right. So let us know. You can hit us up at michaelmartino.ca or vincentmirabelli.com. But Mike, this was fun, man. Yeah, I liked this. I did not think this on decision making was going to be good, but this felt good. This felt good. Nice. I hope you listening also feel that it felt good. But yeah, this is the Business Not As Usual podcast with Vince and Mike. We'll catch you in part 2 in the next episode.
See ya.